When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, Killer T. User, B3RP. Posted, March 4th, 1999.
There wasn't anything special about Joe's t-shirt when he bought it, aside from the price, which was $1. Its seller was one of the traveling liquidation guys who used to roll through town, always setting up shop at the Sunoco across from the bowling alley. They didn't come through on any regular schedule, but when they did, whether they were selling overstocked t-shirts from a van or discount seafood from a school bus, you couldn't find better deals anywhere. No one asked where any of it came from, of course, and you accepted that every now and again, someone would get food poisoning. Sometimes I wonder what Joe's life would have been like if he just gotten Shigella instead of that tea. It would be overstating the case to say that Joe was a friend of mine. It was just that the town had such a small population, you tended to know most everyone in the school on some level. The level at which I knew Joe was as a guy no one liked to spend much time around. He wasn't a bad guy. In fact, he seemed quite sweet. It was just that he had interests which didn't align with most of us. In a little place like that, what people think of you matters, and while they might let private, fringe interests like Japanese animation and other foreign shit slide, talking about it would put you on their radar in the wrong way. Joe talked about it, and consequently, everyone treated him like he had leprosy. Like I said, he was sweet, never understanding why people wouldn't let him in or be his friend. He always thought if he wore the right thing, did his hair the right way, it would change. It was like he saw social groups as some kind of combination lock, and if he just put together the right arrangement of circumstances, they would open up to him. I guess, in the end, he was right, just not for the reasons he thought. It was that t-shirt that changed everything. Like I said, on its face, there was nothing special about it. Plain black with some little cartoon figure in the center. Having a rough idea of what Joe liked and didn't like, I have to assume the figure's design, small, pink, and green with a wide smile on its face and white X's for eyes, was Japanese. Initially, everyone reacted the way you'd expect. If they paid attention to Joe at all, it was to shout insults like "nice shirt, loser," and more homophobic shit I'm not going to repeat here. Women were the first to come around, turning their heads when Joe went by, but only if he was wearing the shirt. When Rhonda Ford said the word cute as he walked past, I don't think there was anyone there who thought even for a second she could be talking to him. As it happened, she was, and others followed. Cord Peterson's girlfriend Stephanie was next, her head swiveling as she passed Joe where he sat eating his lunch on a bench outside the library. Even though all she said was "love the shirt," it was like a bomb going off. None of us could believe what she said, or more appropriately, who she said it to. In a school that small, it was inevitable Cord would hear about this, and quickly. Cord did come to Joe, his posse in tow, something all of us expected to end in a bloodbath. It was outside the east door after class as Joe was walking home. He always moved with his upper body bent forward, legs working double time, eyes down, headphones in his ears. It didn't matter how many times Bully snuck up on him while he listened to that Walkman, Joe refused to leave home without it. Like so many assholes who'd come before, Cord walked up and roughly gripped Joe's shoulder from behind, wheeling him around. This is where it all changed. Instead of pummeling the smaller boy until his ears bled, a Cord's specialty, a sort of bafflement washed over his face. When a blow didn't come, Joe, who'd reflexively put his arms over his face, peeked out from behind cover like a mouse wondering why the cat was toying with him. Seemingly transfixed by something on Joe's person, Cord began bobbing his head as if listening to the heavy metal he usually blasted from his Trans Am. All of us watching were holding our breath, waiting for the carnage to start, unable to believe it when all Cord said was "sick shirt." We couldn't have been more surprised if he'd grown a second head that coughed up white bowling balls. He repeated himself louder this time. "That's a sick fucking shirt, dude. Yo, check this out. I like this shit." His buddies were equally incredulous until Cord beckoned them closer and they were able to get a good look. Once they had, a chorus of voices could be heard. "Oh shit, that is sick. Fucking rad, man. Killer T." I'll never forget how Joe's face changed. He went from fear to incredulity to a spreading sense of wonder, like a Buddha finally reaching enlightenment. Without him having to say a word, I knew exactly what he was thinking. I finally did it. I got the right combination. The poor guy. One of the science teachers, Mr. Kemp, heard the commotion and stuck his head out the window shouting, "What's going on out here?" In complete sincerity, Cord whipped his head around and called back, "Mr. Kemp, you gotta come see this shirt." Clearly perplexed at how this would transform into the sort of bullying which would end in everyone having to stay late, Mr. Kemp popped his head back inside. Moments later, he was storming out the east door toward the gathering crowd. More and more people, drawn by the excitement, had clustered around the ecstatic Joe, murmuring appreciative words. "Why is this happening on school grounds?" Kemp's towering rage was out of proportion to his narrow frame, beige sweater, and mop of curly brown hair. "If you don't disperse right this moment..." He stopped abruptly. Having pushed his way to the center of the frenzy, his eyes went wide. My word, that is a spectacular piece. At this point, my friends and I, who were the only witnesses not obsessively admiring Joe's shirt, not that I had anything against it or its pleasant combination of colors, I just couldn't understand why everyone seemed to be collectively losing their mind. In fact, the tenor of the group was evolving beyond enthusiasm, developing an edge. It was making me uneasy. As for the subject of all this, it was a dream come true. The excitement on Joe's face was the sort of thing you only expect to see on new fathers or astronauts setting foot on unexplored worlds. More teachers streamed out of the building, followed by 100 more students. The violence I had felt coming finally erupted in a series of fistfights between sophomores who felt the seniors in front of them were hogging all the good spots. They too wanted to be close to Joe. The seniors responded with unimaginable fury, their fists mercilessly pulping the smaller kids' faces until there was nothing left of their nervous systems but spastic twitches. Once blood was drawn, rage spread throughout the crowd, turning what had been insistent pushing into life and death struggles. Pocket knives gouged ragged holes in pale throats. Thumbs were thrust into eye sockets, spearing through their warm jelly directly to the brains beyond. And Joe, at the center of this maddening horde, he didn't feel it turning until it was too late. Cord, his first and most ardent admirer, closed the gap between the two of them, so close they might have been lovers. Joe's face reddened, but he didn't seem to mind the unexpected proximity. After all, hadn't attention been what he wanted this whole time? Cord's arms wrapped around the smaller boy, gripping him tightly, then tighter still. Through gaps in the frothing crowd, I caught glimpses of Joe's face going from flushed to red to breathless. He was desperately struggling to break free of Cord's embrace and failing. More of the boys in his inner circle made to grab him, encircling Joe in a group embrace that tightened around him like a boa constrictor. Even over the anguished cries of the mob, I heard the loud, wet crunch that signaled the end of Joe's life. It didn't end there. Once their broken hero went limp in their embrace, his admirers tore at his t-shirt-covered torso, pulling his limbs this way and that as they struggled to be the ones to possess the trophy. His arms tore first, ripping at the shoulder with a ragged, meaty sound. Next came the legs, joints popping with a snap not unlike that of breaking celery. His remainder followed in short order until the t-shirt and its wearer was in innumerable, unspeakable pieces. With his destruction, a spell was broken. You could feel the crowd's ardor draining away, their focus drifting. One by one, then in groupings of 3 or more, they drifted from the scene, seemingly unaffected by what had, only moments before, been an orgy of violence, leaving mangled bodies and lakes of blood in their wake. In the sudden quiet, we watched as wind drove shredded scraps of t-shirt around the trampled remains of Joe's backpack, his Walkman undamaged. No doubt, still playing his song.
Subject, yellow cake. User, ToughTake6398. Posted, February 2nd, 1994.
Have you ever heard of COG? It stands for Continuity of Government. What it is a plan that all the bigwigs put in place so that if the Russians, or whoever comes after the Russians, I guess now that they're gone, ever nukes us, there'll still be someone left to run the show. As for what happens to the rest of us, well, try not to think about it. The actual plans are kept under wraps, but because of what I do for a living, the specifics of which I cannot get into, I know that there are 2 huge underground facilities within an hour's drive of DC. In the event of the unthinkable, it is in those places where a hand-picked group of government figures and their support staff will be taken and, if necessary, kept for the duration of whatever the event happens to be. One of the facilities is Raven Rock, or Site R, in southern Pennsylvania, next to the Maryland state line. Above ground, it's 650 surface acres, and below ground, you've got around 600,000 square feet worth of elbow room, all serviced by Fort Ritchie just down the road. The facility I've actually been inside is the other, Mount Weather in Virginia. Mount Weather is, I'm told, a little smaller than Site R, but it's still over 500,000 square feet. Imagine the Pontiac Silverdome, but 25% bigger and underground. It's got its own hospital, crematorium, meal and rec areas, 20 office buildings, and cots for 2,000 people with private quarters for the president, his cabinet, and the Supreme Court. It's got more than 500,000 gallons of clean drinking water, a power plant, plus lots of other goodies I can't tell you about. And it's all protected by a 10-foot tall, 20-foot wide blast door that weighs 34 tons and takes forever to open. But you know what the blast door can't keep out? What we have never been able to actually find, let alone remove? Whatever the hell lived in the mountain before we started tunneling in the 50s, because let me tell you, they are in there, and they are pissed. The first time we encountered them was our first time on site. My team was there to perform routine maintenance across a number of systems. We were individually escorted to our work sites and then left to our devices. Maybe half an hour after I got into it, my co-worker, who we'll call Greg, left his post in water treatment and came to find me, complaining about a burning feeling in his side. He eats like crap and never exercises, so I figured it was incoming shingles or something, but when I pulled up his work shirt to take a look, I saw 3 ugly purple furrows like scratch marks running from just under his armpit to his waist. I thought maybe his girlfriend Wendy had taken a run at him before work, but he said she hadn't, and that the burning had only started after his escort had left and had gotten down to work. Those scratches took weeks to heal. So long that I encouraged him to get blood work done to make sure there wasn't something suppressing his immune system. On our next visit, it was our electrician Randy who had trouble. He was working in one of the adjacent tunnels where the office buildings are when he stepped away from what he was doing to go take a leak. After he finished, he said the bathroom door wouldn't open. It was a shared bathroom with multiple stalls, so the door didn't have a deadbolt, but he said it felt like it was locked tight. He pulled on the thing so hard he thought his shoulder was gonna pop, but it would not budge. As he was standing there, trying to figure out what the hell was going on, the overhead lights went out. Now, you might get used to being underground for long periods of time, but being underground in the dark, we got a name for that, and it's a permanent one. Randy tried not to panic and was doing okay until he felt someone breathe on his neck. He thought maybe someone else had been trapped in there with him, so he tried saying hello, but no one responded. Randy told me he had started to turn around when he heard a crashing sound from the hallway on the other side of the door, like a tornado made of metal had started bashing into things. He froze in place, the door at his back. Then the breath started on his face. He said it was warm, but smelled like dirt and mold. A second later, the light was back on, and he was alone in there. The door, when he tried it again, opened like nothing. His workstation, though, was a horror show. It looked like someone had put a bomb in his toolbox. A couple of the screwdrivers were actually embedded in the wall across the room. He came to find me, and we brought it up to security, who took it way too easy. They didn't bat an eye and just said, "We'll handle it, move on to your next assignment, and don't leave outside metal unattended. If you need the bathroom again, call us and we'll have someone escort you." None of our follow-up questions were answered, and you can guess we had a few. The next time, though, the security supervisor called me into his office as soon as we arrived. He referenced the incident on our last maintenance visit and said I could do one of two things. Either my team could have constant supervision, which we both knew would be a time-consuming pain in the ass for all involved, or I could do something but not ask any further questions about it. That got my interest, but of course I had, questions. The soup just shook his head and said to choose. Since I didn't want to have someone breathing down my neck the entire workday, I said I'd take the other thing. He raised his eyebrow and asked if I was sure because he was genuinely not going to answer any questions I might ask. I said I was. He stood up and led me out of his office into the central administrative lobby, right to a stack of Tupperware containers on a long table. He opened one and showed me. Stacked inside was maybe 3 dozen 3-inch by 3-inch pieces of what looked like yellow cake. He counted out as many pieces of cake as we had members of my team, wrapped them in its own paper napkin, and handed them to me. "Give one of these to each of your team members and tell them to set it a few feet behind them when they start to work. Tell them that no matter what they hear, they are not to turn around. You can go now." I didn't move. Instead, I stared at the cake. "Is this?" I said. The security supervisor stopped me. "No questions, son. It's just saffron cake. Nothing to worry about. Just tell your boys that they need to do this every time they come here and every time they move to a new area. You'll be fine. Hell, feel free to eat some if you like. Just don't forget to leave some too." You can imagine the response I got coming back with a handful of cake and instructions like that, but we did exactly what he said and didn't have any issues on that maintenance visit. That was not the end of our experiences in Mount Weather, however, but that's a story for another time.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.